Hi, I'm Robert Rickover. I'm an Alexander Technique teacher in Lincoln, Nebraska. I also teach in Toronto, Canada. And my guest today is Mary Derbyshire, who's also an Alexander teacher, and she teaches and lives in Little Compton, Rhode Island. And we're going to talk today a little bit about fitness, the Alexander Technique, and with a bit of an emphasis on older adults, because Mary has a bit of a specialty in working with older adults. And Mary is both a fitness instructor and an Alexander Tech teacher, which I think is a little bit of an unusual combination. How would you react to that statement, Mary?
I think that's very true, Robert. I remember when I was training to become an Alexander teacher way back in the early 90s, and I was a personal trainer at the same time when I was in my training, and it was almost heresy for me to say that I was in the fitness world.
And why was that?
I think there's some misunderstanding about what Alexander says in his books when he refers to the exercise culture or the fitness culture. And I think my interpretation, after going over it many times, is that what he was saying is that exercise, if you have your faulty habits, you have your misuse, and when you exercise with your misuse, you are just misusing yourself that much more. And if that is the situation, then exercise can actually be more detrimental to certain aspects of your being.
It can actually kind of drive the bad habits in a little deeper.
Exactly. So my take, if you step back and you say, well, the first step of everything is the Alexander Technique, right? The Alexander Technique makes everything better. It's not that exercise is evil or bad. Exercise in and of itself is just movement. And we are human beings. We are designed to move. And so if you look at exercise as just movement, then we're designed to exercise. And when you use the Alexander Technique as a means to exercise, well, it makes exercise just that much more beneficial.
I wonder if you could give a very, very short definition or description of the Alexander Technique.
Okay, the way I see it, the Alexander Technique is a mindfulness-based practice, and it teaches you how to move better. And when you move better, you feel better. Aches and pains go away. You use less muscular tension. You feel more confident in your skin. Your agility and your balance and your mobility improves.
Right. And among the many things you may decide to do are fitness exercises.
Correct.
I do think that I don't want to speak for all Alexander teachers for sure, but I think in the Alexander world, there's a kind of awareness that some fitness programs, like if you go into a fitness club and see people being run through a regimen of, intense exercises by a fitness instructor, there may be a certain amount of focus on just quantity of activity or intensity of activity as opposed to a kind of a mindfulness about how you're doing the activity. And I know the club I go to, there are lots of exercise machines and there's a giant TV set up on the wall.
Right.
And almost everybody who's using these the machines, walkers and so on, are either watching TV or they're reading their newspaper or something on a little stand that's built into the exercise machine. And it's hard to imagine that also there's not a lot of options there to be mindful unless you just blank out all this external stuff.
Right. But I think what you're describing exists. It's everywhere.
Right.
But what you're describing is exercise culture.
Right.
That's the culture that has grown up around exercise. And this whole, I write about this in my book, is that whole idea that, it's so codified. You have the gym rats and the equipment in the gym and the way those things are done, or you have the fitness classes and, sort of the CrossFit and the boot camp classes. Right. And so it's almost like, movement, right? Let's go back to thinking of exercise as movement. It's been hijacked, and it creates, I think it's really intimidating to a lot of people. And so they feel so alienated from their right to just move and experience that expression of movement.
Mm-hmm. So you're saying people who actually would take a few fitness classes,
right? That
leaving because it's no fun, maybe in some cases, and maybe there is probably I imagine some people could seriously injure themselves in those kind of classes.
Oh yeah, and they do. I mean, I see it all the time. I'm sure you see it as well as a teacher.
Well, I want to just recount something that happened yesterday, or maybe it was July 4th. I was swimming in the pool, because that's really why I go to the club. But I could see people outside. There was like a group that was doing some sort of a sequential activity where they were going from station to station, lifting a weight, doing push-ups, doing this and that. And I was watching them as they lifted this weight. And they would lift it, and then they would pull their bodies back in this really inefficient stance. It was like their idea of standing up straight with a weight.
Right.
Which is not good.
Right.
And I could see how someone could actually injure themselves doing that. And these were all young. They were like all in their 20s. It was like a little club of fitness activists. And there I was, just
in the pool.
I could see it out of the corner of my eye. It was a fascinating experience.
Right. Right. So if they had a little bit of Alexander knowledge, honestly, just think how much better they would be lifting that weight.
There was a part that says, get out of the pool and go out there and just show them they don't have to add that extra stuff at the end. It would save them a lot of grief, but I did not do that. So now you teach fitness classes, and you gave a little demonstration at the. We were Mary and I were both at an annual General Alexander annual conference event in San Diego, and you gave a little fitness class to the people in your class on this topic at the end, and you were moving right along, right? It wasn't. There was a lot of movement.
Right, there's a good clip to it.
So what are you doing different than what distinguishes how you run a fitness class versus sort of the kind we've been talking about?
Well, I do everything through the lens of the Alexander technique.
And
so I think is movement as being open. I'm not so much within the fitness culture is around the crunch or the contraction, right? The work aspect of it, and I'm looking at more one's range of motion and one's what I call a movement vocabulary. The way that the arm articulates, the way that the knee articulates. And so that series that I brought you and everybody in the class through, that is my basic warm-up that I do for all of my classes. And it's a big expression of how you move, of how this is how the arm moves. This is how, right?
Right.
So the shoulder rotates.
You yourself, who is the model, so to speak, that we're all taking our cues from, you're not just doing the movements mechanically. You're doing them mindfully.
Totally.
With an intent based on Alexander ideas, to do them well, to do them easily, efficiently, however you want to describe it. So to some extent, you're providing a different model for the people in the class than a fitness instructor might do. But you're also using words that are a little different. I think when I overhear fitness classes on my way in and out, I don't actually see them. They're on an upper level. But the instructors are pretty much screaming.
Right.
You know, all right, we're going to have 5 more of these to do. Come on, you know.
Right, and the language is very harsh.
It's harsh, yeah.
It's not open. It's not free. It's not light. It's about doubling down, bearing down, and once again, this contraction, this compression, right?
Yeah, that's a major. Yeah, that is a major aspect. I mean, I don't think they would call it compression or contraction, but that is what they're emphasizing indirectly, right?
Yes.
Over, yes. I would say not just over contraction. I mean, there
very, very much so.
Over contraction.
Right. They're not looking for efficiency. They're looking for workload, right? It's a workout. They want you to work.
So they're interested in quantity, either a number of repetitions or heaviness of the weights or length of time that you're doing them, that kind
total end gaining the whole way.
End gaining being an Alexander phrase for, I just want to get this thing and I'm not paying any attention to how I get it.
Right.
And really, the Alexander technique is all about how you get things.
Right.
So, yeah, there is this end gaining mentality in a lot of fitness instruction.
Yes.
And of course, you don't do that.
No.
But that doesn't mean that people in your class aren't moving right along, because we all were. Maybe a little less than some of the other people, but there were people were pretty active.
Yes, they are, and it's joyful. I want to add that as well.
Yeah.
I think that
they were having fun.
Yes, fun. You can't underestimate fun, and it's important to approach movement, exercise with joy and openness.
And I think for a lot of people, they're not going to carry on with it very long if there isn't some element of fun in it.
Right.
It's just not going to be not going to draw them to stay. Now, I think this is a perfect segue point to discuss your area of specialization. Apart from fitness, being a fitness instructor, that a lot of your students and a lot of your fitness clients are elderly.
Yes. So the classes that I teach are, I wouldn't even say I gear them for seniors, but I just have mostly seniors. I'd say 95% seniors in my classes. Right. And when I say seniors, I'm talking about people into their 90s.
Right.
Who do just that very same routine that, and much, much more. That was just the beginning that I taught at that conference. And as Robert said, it really is, it goes at quite a clip. It
goes at a very, very, you're moving right along the whole time. I will say that. Now, you told a story at the class, which I think would be really great to share with our viewers, about the 2 groups of people at this center where you teach the fitness class.
Yeah, I teach at this wellness center in town, and upstairs is an adult daycare center. And these individuals, we see them coming in the morning, and they're on their walkers or their canes, and some of them are even in wheelchairs. And so there's that group upstairs, and then there's my group downstairs. And my group downstairs is the exact same age, if not maybe even older than some of the people that are in upstairs. And when I teach, one of my big things that I say when I teach fitness is, if you do it, you can do it. But if you don't do it, you can't. Mm-hmm. And for all of you seniors out there who are listening to this, there's a little bit more to that. If you start doing it again, you can do it again. So let me just be on my soapbox for 2 seconds here. Our culture is far too sedentary. We sit, and we sit even more than we used to sit, because now we have computers and iPads and TV that goes all day, all night. Mm-hmm. So movement is the key to agility and mobility and balance. The Alexander technique is the key as well. But you couple that with movement, and it just brings so much to your life.
Well, I mean, the Alexander technique really isn't much of anything without movement.
Right.
Even if someone is sitting, quote, still, they're breathing, and there's little balance adjustments. So it is all about movement. Now, here's a devil's advocate question for you.
Yeah.
Upstairs group.
Yeah.
Let's say that by some miracle you could get them all moved downstairs physically to at one time for a class of yours. Mm-hmm. You obviously wouldn't start where you were working with the other.
No.
Now. But do you think that over a reasonable period of time, if they were interested, that you could get many or most or a certain number of them to be able to be participants in your other class?
Well, I can't say that for sure, but I can say this. I definitely have had people come to my class on walkers or canes, mm-hmm. who are no longer on walkers or canes.
And because of the class, or is it also because they're having Alexander lessons with you, or
some just because of the class, some both.
So some people who were really pretty limited in their movement ability.
Yeah.
They could walk, but with a walker and so on. That with the right kind of, we call it fitness training, they can learn to get it.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Ditch the walker. And certainly with some Alexander training, it would probably help a lot too, right?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Right. So you don't see, I mean, most people think, someone's in their 80s, boy, they're kind of over the hill, but that's really not true. I mean, it doesn't have to be true at all for most people.
It does not have to be true. It does not have to be true.
I guess it's probably true that if someone at pretty much any age just isn't doing much of any kind of movement, maybe they walk to their car, they walk from their car to their office, and they just don't do a lot of movement, they're gonna become not so fit pretty quickly.
Right. They're gonna atrophy very quickly.
They just and it can get it back, hopefully, if they decide to, but after 20, 30 years of that, it's going to be, I mean, kids today, a lot of them aren't doing much in the way of exercise. So I read somewhere that there are two things you can do to drastically change your situation in life. If you're a smoker, quit smoking. Yeah.
The other one is start exercising.
Yeah, and that's pretty standard medical advice
mm-hmm.
These days. Okay.
Yeah.
A lot of doctors have basically said that those two things will make a gigantic difference.
I have a little story I just want to bring here. It's my mom went to her cardiologist. My mom's in her late 80s. Mm-hmm. And her cardiologist asked her, "How's your balance?" And my mom said, "Well, my balance could be a lot better." My mother was not coming to my exercise classes. She lives around the corner. Right. Her cardiologist said, "Well, you can try doing a little of this, or you can try doing a little of that, or you could go to your daughter's exercise classes." And my mother, the past year and a half, has been coming to my exercise classes, and she says that her balance has greatly improved. So
yeah. Well, is there anything else that you'd want to add to this discussion?
No, I'm just really happy that you asked me to be here with you. And I encourage everyone to learn about the Alexander Technique, find a teacher nearby, and couple that with some exercise, and you're well on your way.
Okay, well, I'll put some relevant information by this interview, and I think this would be an interesting interview for Alexander teachers to watch too, because quite honestly, a lot of us have a little bit of a bias against things like fitness classes. It's maybe not really looking at it in the best way. That's
right.
My take on it. Mary, thank you. This has been fun.
Thank you, Robert.